Another live stream. So today I'm going to talk about Donna Lee, and we're going to look at the chord progression. So this is a fact on back home in Indiana. Okay, so that process is basically when a chord progression that has already been written for a particular tune is used to for a newer tune by a different artist, and or I guess it could be the same artist, but typically a different artist, and they write a new melody on it. So that's what we have here with Donna Lee. So we're going to look at that chord progression, kind of work through everything. And I didn't bring my guitar with me, although you can see if you're watching this on video, got a ton of guitars behind me. But I'm just going to do an analysis talk today. All right, so let's get into the tune a little bit and talk about. Oh, and I also want to mention, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've been doing some playing with backing tracks, and I've been testing all that and finding that the live stream video sounds really good. And then there's some strange things going on with the sound that ends up in the podcast. So I'm working on that. But if you've been listening to the podcast and wondering, well, I wonder what's going on with that sound. Well, I'm also wondering what's going on with that sound, but gonna figure it out and get that kind of fixed. So we'll see how things progress this week. All right, so back to Donna Lee. So we're in the key of A flat for this. And here we're referencing the real book, so probably have a copy of this. So it's important to, when we're first looking at a tune, think about the key center. So what's the key center? So what I recommend doing is taking a look overall at the chords, just kind of scanning over them, maybe looking for little progressions within the form, and taking note of the chord on the first measure, and the chord on, let's say this is a 32 bar form, the chord on bar, let's say 31. Okay, so here, that's not going to give you a definitive idea of what exactly the key is, but it will tell you and give you at least some idea that it might be. This one we can say starts and ends on A flat, so that's a pretty strong, pointing us pretty strongly into the direction of A flat as we try to figure out what the key center is. And then we can take a look. Let's say look at measure 9 goes to the 4 chord, 4 minor. So those are pretty typical progressions in general. And then we have the 1 chord, dominant 7 after that, or 4 bars after the 4 chord, and then 2/5 back to A flat. So it seems like it's continuing to move back to A flat after going into different chords. So let's do kind of a one by one here. So A flat we'll call the 1 chord, and let's write down some chords that that we might expect in this key. So you take the key of A flat, key of 4 flats. So we might have A flat major 7, B flat minor 7, C minor 7, D flat major 7, E flat 7, F minor 7, and G half diminished 7. So we can go through a number. We say, okay, A flat is going to be the 1, B flat minor would be the 2, C minor would be the 3, D flat major 7 would be the 4, E flat 7 would be the 5, F minor 7 would be the 6, and then G minor 7, flat 5, or G half diminished, is the 7. Okay, so this gives us a starting point for what to expect. It doesn't mean that everything has to fall into these chords. So we could have different chord qualities. We could have different root notes all together. Now, for the most part, probably will be mainly in this key as far as root notes go, but we will have a lot of chord quality changes. So A flat will be the 1 chord, and then F will be the 6th chord. Now notice this is F7, and when we wrote out the chords that we're expecting in this key, we have F minor 7. So there's a little bit of a difference. We can call this a 5 of 2. Okay. And then the B flat 7 will be the 2 chord. Another chord where the chord quality is different than what we find just strictly within the key of 4 flats. All right, so the 2 chord, we're going to make that a major chord and dominant. So it's a dominant 7th chord. Okay, and then our chord quality shifts to minor. So we have a minor 2, E flat 7 will be a 5, and then we get the 1 chord. So I was talking to a student last week, I think on this day last week, and she's pretty new to music in general, and she has some questions about chords and things, and so when you have someone, well, this is what I was explaining, but you have someone who does, let's say classical, let's say they study classical piano or classical guitar, and this is definitely case by case kind of thing, but in general I found this to be the case, is that they work on pieces and they may be playing chords, but they might not actually know what the chord name is. All right, so they're playing a piece and they're playing it the way it physically feels to do it, and using the ear and all that, and generally using sheet music. So knowing what the chord names are, that's kind of one level that's important in at least you might say popular music and contemporary music, and I would say in classical music too, but it kind of I guess depends on what you're setting out to do and what the level ends up being. But so anyway, there's that kind of thing. So a musician like that, if they're interested in knowing, what the chord names are, then you can free yourself up and say, well, I'm going to play some rhythm guitar, or I'm going to accompany on um, piano, let's say, from a lead sheet, or something that gives a basic melody and the basic chords, but doesn't specifically tell you what to do as far as the chords go, and when to play them, and the rhythms, and things like that. But it does give you an idea of the chord. But you could play, you could voice it in many different ways, and you can assign your own rhythm and things like that. So there's that kind of level, I would say, of just understanding. Okay, and then if we bump up one more level of understanding, so we want to know the functionality, and music's not it's not always functional, but um, oftentimes it is. So we want to know, how does this relate to a key center? How does this progression function? Is this a 5-1 kind of motion? Is this a secondary dominant? Is this predominant? So we have those different layers of understanding, and when you're an improviser, it's really, I would say, necessary to know how to um, think about chord progressions, and be able to think of them in Roman numerals. It also will help you transpose keys. All right, so this E flat minor 7 to D7, we might think, okay, there's a minor, maybe minor 5, and D. We don't necessarily have that in a key, so it's a D natural root note, so versus D flat. So we can look at kind of where it's going here. So we're going to a D flat chord, and that is the 4 chord. So we can say that this is functioning as a 2, 5 in the key of D flat. And the 5, which as it's written here, is more like a tritone substitute. So it's like, say, flat 2. And the 5 would be an A flat 7. Okay, which you could think of in terms of as like a 5 of 4. Okay, so there's the functionality of that, and then we get to the 4 chord. Okay, and then we get to a minor 4. Now, another very common progression, and another maybe even alternate change, is to have a G flat 7 there, which will give you a flat 7 kind of sound. But that turns into another couple of options there, and then we go back to the 1 chord. So I'm just going to notate this D flat minor 7 as the minor 4 there. Okay, 1. Okay, and then the 6 chord, which again we could say 5 of 2. Then we get to the 2 chord and the 2 minor. So we've seen some of this progression before. So 2 minor into the E flat 7, and that's going to finish 16 bars, the first half of the form. And as you can see here, we have an A-B form here. So next up, we start out pretty much the same, and then we quickly go into a new direction. So we have, and just to kind of back up here as well, the 6 is the relative minor. So that's an important spot where you oftentimes find that a tune might go in that direction. So that's what we're going to find here. So we have 1 chord for A flat, and then we'll call this F7. We'll call this 5 of 2. And we have the 2. All right. And then we go into a new direction. So we have a C7. If you remember, C7, we had the we had a minor chord. That's the 3. So let's take a little moment here. We're going to go into kind of a new direction, but we'll talk a little bit about Phrygian dominant and talk a little bit about the 3 chord. So the 3 chord is an interesting spot, right? So if let's say think in the key of 4 flats, we think about a C chord. So let's say we're thinking and using a mode name here as a kind of a shorthand. So we have the Phrygian mode. So Phrygian is it's fairly dissonant because we have this flat 6 or flat 13, and we also have this flat 9. And the flat 9 is not a typical sound that you hear on the on a minor chord, let's say. Another issue with the 3 chord is that it sits a fifth above the relative minor. The root note has that interval between it. That's up a perfect fifth or down a perfect fourth. So given that, and given that the relative minor has a 5 chord that is minor, at least in let's say F natural or F Aeolian, what we can do is adjust our scale so that we have a leading tone. Otherwise, it's not really pushing us towards that that F note. So if we have a note that's just a half step below the F7, then we can kind of get it to push us into that F and make it feel more like a tonic. So let's say you look at F harmonic minor. So in F harmonic minor, you're going to have an E natural. So kind of keep the same key signature, key of 4 flats, and then we're just going to adjust that E flat, move it up a half step, and we get the E natural. So what does that do to the C chord? Well, if you have an E natural in the C chord, that means you have a major chord, and we still have this B flat, so we still have a flat 7, so it becomes a dominant 7. So it's really achieves that goal of giving us a 5-1. So that's a solution that harmonic minor offers us, and when you apply it to the 5 chord in that harmonic minor, in this case C, then you get what's called the Phrygian dominant. All right, so let's get back to this. So we have C7. So really we're going to be thinking F minor for this part here. So we would just say 5, 1. Okay. You can see here, if you're looking at the sheet music, and if you're watching on the podcast, I'd recommend taking a look at a lead sheet on it. You can see here that there's no change to any note except for that E, which we just talked about. Right. So at least in the melody. So you have an E natural, and then you still have everything else from the key signature. So that's exactly what we just talked about. So then that can kind of inform your decisions on how you might improvise. Not that you'd have to limit yourself to that, but that would be a good place to start for sure. So we get the 5 to the 1 to the 5. Remember, we're thinking in F minor right now. So 1, 5, 1. Okay. So F minor. So we're going to call it a minor 1 for the time being. And then the 5, C7, 5, back to F minor, the 1. And then we get this, so what's notated as A flat diminished, which you could play. You could also play, let's say, B diminished. If you take a look at the tones here, we have B, D, F, A flat in the melody, so diminished type chord, and that's one of those symmetrical type chord shapes. Everything's a minor third part, so you get a B diminished, D diminished, F diminished, A flat diminished. So all the inversions are all symmetrical. But just to note, maybe another possibility. Let's say maybe a G7 flat 9. That would give us more of a 5 of 3. So I'll just throw that out there as a possibility. And then you could go to this A flat, or maybe go to the 3, which would be C minor. Okay, and then F7 will be the 5 of the 2. And then we get B flat minor 7, which would be a 2, E flat 7, 5, and then a 1. So if we sum up this tune, we're going to find that it often, at least in the A section, it sort of sits on that 2 chord, with a dominant 7. It goes to the 4 chord and then does the 4 minor thing. And then in the second half of the form, it goes to that B flat again, the 2 chord, but then it primarily goes to the relative minor. So those are kind of the centers that it tends to pull towards. And so it's helpful to take a step back and try to think about how all of those things work. And then we have a 2-5 back to the beginning, which is going to be the 4 chord. All right, everybody, thanks for checking this out. I really wanted to make sure to get in a talk today. I'm trying to get a talk in at least 5 days a week. So tomorrow I will definitely be back and do another talk. I'll probably do some playing and things like that as well. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you all in the next one.